Jake Morrison stood at the window of his quarters aboard the starship Valiant, watching the massive alien ship grow larger against the starfield. His reflection stared back at him, a man of 32 with brown hair and tired green eyes. In 6 hours, he would marry a princess from another world, a princess he had never met. The door chimed, and his friend Ryan Brooks entered without waiting for permission. Ryan had been Jake's roommate at the Space Academy and his closest friend for over a decade. Now Ryan served as captain of the escort ship Guardian, while Jake commanded the Valiant. "Still brooding about the wedding?" Ryan asked, settling into a chair. "You know, most men would be excited about marrying a princess." Jake turned from the window. "Most men don't marry aliens for political reasons." "Come on, Jake. The reports say she's beautiful and smart. The Zephyrians are the most advanced race we've ever encountered. Their technology could help humanity reach the far edges of the galaxy." Jake had read those same reports dozens of times. Princess Zarathel was described as brilliant, with 3 advanced degrees in subjects that didn't even exist in human universities. She spoke 17 languages and could communicate telepathically with other members of her species. The Zephyrians lived for hundreds of years, possessed silver skin that seemed to glow with inner light, and had built an empire spanning 40 star systems. "That's exactly what worries me," Jake said. "What does a princess from such an advanced civilization want with a human soldier like me?" Ryan laughed. "Maybe she likes the rugged military type, or maybe she's curious about humans. We're still pretty new to this whole galactic community thing." The marriage had been arranged as part of a peace treaty between the Human Colonial Federation and the Zephyrian Empire. For months, diplomats had worked out the details. The Zephyrians offered advanced technology, protection from hostile alien species, and access to their trade networks. In return, humanity would provide raw materials from their colonies and military support when needed. The marriage was meant to seal the alliance. Jake had been chosen because of his military record and his diplomatic training. He had successfully negotiated peace with 3 different alien species during humanity's expansion into space. Admiral Lisa Carter, head of her Colonial Command, had personally asked him to accept the assignment. "Think of it as serving your species," she had told him. "This marriage could secure humanity's future among the stars." Jake understood his duty, but understanding and accepting were different things. He had always imagined marrying for love, having children who would carry on his family name, growing old with someone who shared his memories and dreams. Instead, he was about to bind his life to an alien being he couldn't even communicate with properly. A message appeared on his communication screen. The Zephyrian flagship, called the Stellar Crown, was requesting permission to dock with New Geneva Station. The wedding would take place on the neutral space station, with representatives from both species present. Jake put on his formal military uniform, the blue and gold dress uniform of the Colonial Navy. The jacket felt heavy with its medals and ribbons from various campaigns. He had earned each one through years of service, protecting human colonies from pirates and hostile aliens. Now those same accomplishments had led him to this moment. The docking bay of New Geneva Station buzzed with activity. Diplomatic vessels from a dozen different alien species had arrived to witness the ceremony. This was more than just a wedding between 2 individuals. It was a symbol of cooperation between different worlds and species. Jake waited with the human delegation as the Zephyrian princess's shuttle approached. Admiral Carter stood beside him, her gray hair perfectly arranged and her expression serious. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, humanity's leading expert on alien cultures, held a translation device that would help with communication. The shuttle was beautiful, made of some metallic material that shifted colors as it moved. It landed without a sound, and the boarding ramp extended smoothly. Jake held his breath as figures emerged from the craft. The first to appear were Zephyrian guards, tall beings, in flowing robes that seemed to be made of liquid starlight. Their silver skin caught the station's lights, and their large blue eyes surveyed the area with careful attention. They moved with a grace that made them seem like they were floating rather than walking. Then she appeared. Princess Zarathel was taller than Jake had expected, nearly matching his own height of 6 feet. Her silver skin had a soft glow, and her hair was a shade of deep blue that reminded him of Earth's oceans. She wore robes similar to her guards, but in colors of white and gold that marked her royal status. Most striking were her eyes, large and luminous, with an intelligence that seemed to look right through him. She approached with measured steps, her expression calm and unreadable. When she reached the human delegation, she stopped and studied Jake for a long moment. He felt as though she was examining not just his appearance, but something deeper. "Commander Morrison," she said in perfect English, her voice carrying a musical quality. "I am honored to meet you." Jake bowed slightly, as he had been instructed. "The honor is mine, Your Highness." The formal ceremony took place in the station's largest conference hall, which had been decorated with flowers from both Earth and the Zephyrian homeworld. Representatives from various alien species watched as Jake and Zarathel spoke their vows through translators. The words felt strange in Jake's mouth. He was promising to honor and protect someone he barely knew, to join his life with hers, for the good of both their peoples. When Zarathel spoke her vows, her voice carried an emotion he couldn't identify, something that seemed almost like sadness. The reception afterward was a formal affair with diplomatic speeches and carefully planned conversations. Jake found himself talking with various alien dignitaries, each expressing hopes for the success of the human-Zephyrian alliance. Through it all, he was aware of Zarathel watching him from across the room. When they finally had a moment to speak, privately, she approached him with something that might have been nervousness. "Commander, I hope you understand that this arrangement is as new to me as it is to you," she said. "I have studied your species extensively, but meeting you in person is quite different from reading reports." "You've studied humans?" Jake asked, surprised. "For several years," she admitted. "Your people fascinate us. You accomplish so much in such short lifespans, and your capacity for adaptation is remarkable." Before Jake could ask what she meant, by that, Admiral Carter interrupted to introduce them to more diplomatic guests. The evening continued with formal conversations and ceremonial toasts, but Jake couldn't stop thinking about Zarathel's words. As the reception ended, Jake realized that tomorrow he would begin a new life aboard a Zephyrian ship, bound to an alien princess whose true thoughts remained a mystery. He had served humanity faithfully for 15 years, but this might be his greatest challenge yet. The quarters aboard the Stellar Crown were larger than Jake's entire apartment back on Earth. The Zephyrians had modified the space for human needs, adding furniture at the right height and adjusting the lighting to something closer to Earth normal. Still, everything felt alien, from the walls that seemed to pulse with soft light to the air that carried unfamiliar scents. Jake sat on the edge of what he assumed was a bed, though it looked more like a platform covered in some kind of adaptive material. His formal uniform hung in a closet that had appeared from the wall when he needed it. The Zephyrian technology was impressive, but it made him feel like a primitive guest in an advanced world. A soft chime announced someone at the door. Jake knew it had to be Zarathel. They were married now, bound together by treaties and ceremonies, but they were still strangers to each other. "Enter," he called, using the English word since he didn't know how to operate the Zephyrian door controls. Zarathel stepped inside, and Jake noticed immediately that she looked different. Gone were the formal royal robes. Instead, she wore a simple garment that reminded him of a comfortable dress, and her hair was loose around her shoulders. But more than her appearance, something in her manner had changed. She seemed nervous, almost uncertain. "Jake," she said, and hearing his name without his military title surprised him. "We need to talk about why you're really here." She moved to a control panel on the wall, her fingers dancing over symbols that glowed at her touch. The room hummed with energy, and Jake felt a strange tingling sensation on his skin. "I have activated privacy shields," Zarathel explained. "No one can hear us or monitor what we say. What I am about to tell you must remain between us, at least for now." Jake stood up, his military training making him alert to potential danger. "What's going on?" Instead of answering immediately, Zarathel approached him slowly. When she was close enough that he could see the worry in her large blue eyes, she stopped. "May I touch your hand?" she asked. The question was so unexpected that Jake almost stepped back. Why? My people communicate through mental contact as well as speech. It will be easier to show you what I mean than to explain it in words. Jake hesitated, then extended his hand. Zarathel's fingers were warm despite her silver skin, and the moment they touched, the world changed. Suddenly, Jake could feel what Zarathel was feeling. Not just emotions, but thoughts and images that flowed directly into his mind. He saw the Zephyrian homeworld, a beautiful planet covered in crystal cities that reached toward purple skies. He felt the history of her people, their rise from primitive beings to masters of technology and space travel. But underneath the beauty and advancement, he sensed something wrong. The Zephyrians in the images moved through their crystal cities, like sleepwalkers. Their faces showed little emotion. Their interactions seemed formal and distant. Even their telepathic communications felt cold, like data transfers rather than real conversation. Do you see? Zarathel's voice echoed in his mind. We are dying, Jake. Not from disease or war, but from our own perfection. The images shifted, showing him other alien species, dozens of different races, each unique and vibrant. But as he watched, he saw them change over time, becoming more like the Zephyrians. Their distinct cultures faded. Their unique traits disappeared, until they were just another part of the Zephyrian Empire. For 3,000 years, we have been absorbing other species, Zarathel continued through their mental link. We tell ourselves we are helping them advance, bringing them the benefits of our civilization. But the truth is, we take what makes them special and add it to ourselves, leaving them empty shells. Jake jerked his hand away, breaking the connection. The sudden return to normal reality made him dizzy. That's why you married me, he said, understanding flooding through him. You want to absorb humanity too. Zarathel's expression was pained. That was the original plan, yes. But Jake, your species is different. We have been studying humans for decades, ever since you developed space travel. We expected you to follow the same pattern as other species we have encountered. She began pacing the room, her movements agitated in a way that seemed very un-Zephyrian. Other species, when they encounter our superior technology, become dependent on it. They stop innovating, stop growing, stop being what made them unique, but humans don't do that. When you see our technology, you try to understand it, improve it, make it your own. When we offer you easy solutions, you still prefer to solve problems yourselves. Jake thought about human colonies he had visited. Even those that traded regularly with alien species maintained their own distinct cultures, their own ways of doing things. Humans were curious about alien technology, but they didn't worship it. Your friend Captain Brooks, Zarathel continued. When he saw our ship's engines, his first question was not, "Can you give us this technology?" but "How does it work?" Dr. Rodriguez has been asking questions about our culture that we stopped asking ourselves centuries ago. She stopped pacing and looked directly at him. Jake, my people are terrified of humanity, not because you are strong or violent, but because you represent something we lost long ago. You grow stronger through struggle instead of weaker. You find joy in simple things we have forgotten how to appreciate. You form deep emotional bonds that we can barely understand anymore. The weight of her words settled on Jake like a physical burden. So this marriage, what is it really supposed to accomplish? The High Council believes that by creating hybrid children with combined human and Zephyrian traits, we can bridge the gap between our species. These children would carry human adaptability but Zephyrian longevity and telepathic abilities. Over time, this would allow us to slowly integrate humanity into our empire. And you agreed to this? Zarathel's expression became even more troubled. I was raised to serve my people, to do what was best for the empire. But Jake, spending time with your diplomatic team, reading about human history, watching how you interact with each other, I have begun to question everything I was taught. She sat down on a chair that formed itself from the floor as she approached it. When I saw you today at the wedding ceremony, when you looked at me with genuine curiosity instead of greed or fear, I felt something I have never experienced before. My people would call it an illogical emotional response. You would call it hope. Jake sat back down on the bed, his mind racing. What exactly are you hoping for? That maybe there is another way. That instead of absorbing humanity into our empire, we could learn from you. That maybe you could help us remember what we have forgotten. She stood up again, moving to the wall display that showed the stars outside. But Jake, you must understand the danger. If the High Council realizes that I have told you this, if they suspect that I am questioning their plans, they will remove me from the equation. They might even decide that humanity is too dangerous to integrate and choose a more direct approach to neutralizing the threat you represent. Jake felt a chill run through him. You mean war? Or worse, they have technologies that could make your entire species forget who you were, turn you into willing servants who believe they are living better lives as part of our empire. The room fell silent, except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Jake looked at this alien princess who had risked everything to warn him, and he realized that despite their differences, despite the political nature of their marriage, he was beginning to care about her. So what do we do? He asked. Zarathel turned from the stars to look at him, and for the first time since he had met her, she smiled. It was a small smile, uncertain and fragile, but it transformed her entire face. We do what humans do best, she said. We find a way to solve an impossible problem. Over the next few days, Zarathel began showing Jake parts of the stellar crown that were normally forbidden to outsiders. What he saw there disturbed him more than he could have imagined. In the lower levels of the ship, Jake encountered Zephyrians who moved like living ghosts. These were the eldest members of the crew, beings who had lived for over 500 years. Their silver skin had grown pale and dull, and their once bright blue eyes seemed empty of any real emotion or curiosity. They performed their duties, with mechanical precision, but there was no joy or satisfaction in their work. This is what we become, Zarathel explained, as they walked through a corridor where ancient Zephyrians tended to complex machinery, extended life without purpose, knowledge without wisdom, power without passion. Jake watched an elderly Zephyrian engineer adjust a control panel with movements that looked more like ritual than actual repair work. How long has he been doing that same job? 300 years, Zarathel replied. He has mastered every aspect of ship engineering, learned everything there is to know about propulsion systems and energy management. But he stopped innovating 2 centuries ago. Now he simply maintains what others created. They continued deeper into the ship, passing through areas that Jake realized were essentially museums, rooms filled with artifacts and technologies from dozens of different species, all perfectly preserved but no longer actively used or developed. Each display represents a species we have integrated, Zarathel said, her voice heavy with sadness. The Kelvani were master artists whose sculptures could make you weep with their beauty. The Therian built cities that existed in perfect harmony with their planet's ecosystem. The Vash developed mathematics so advanced it allowed them to predict weather patterns centuries in advance. Jake studied a display case containing what looked like a musical instrument made of crystallized light. What happened to them? They are still alive in a sense. Many of them live on Zephyrian worlds using our technology, following our customs, but they no longer create art or build cities or develop new mathematical theories. They have been absorbed into our civilization, and their unique gifts have been added to our collective knowledge, but not used. Zarathel shook her head. We preserve their achievements, but we do not build upon them. We are collectors of greatness, not creators of it. They entered a vast chamber that housed the ship's central computer system. The technology was beyond anything Jake had seen, with patterns of light flowing through crystalline structures that seemed to pulse with their own life. But even here, the Zephyrians who maintained the system worked with the same mechanical precision he had observed elsewhere. Your Dr. Rodriguez would find this fascinating, Zarathel said. She asks questions about our technology that our own people stopped asking centuries ago. Jake thought about Elena Rodriguez, the human xenobiologist who had been studying Zephyrian culture. She had been amazed by their achievements but puzzled by what she called their lack of curiosity about their own innovations. She noticed something was wrong, didn't she? Very quickly, She asked why we had stopped developing new technologies despite having the resources and knowledge to do so. She wanted to know why our art and music had remained unchanged for thousands of years. These are questions that made some members of the High Council uncomfortable. Zarathel led him to a viewing chamber where they could see space outside the ship. In the distance, Jake could make out several smaller vessels following the Stellar Crown. Those ships carry representatives from species that have joined our empire, Zarathel explained. They believe they are here to witness the beginning of a new age of cooperation between Zephyrians and humans. They do not know they are actually observers, sent to study how humanity responds to integration. Jake felt anger building inside him. You're using them as test subjects. We have done this 26 times before, Zarathel admitted. Each time we study a promising species, arrange some form of alliance or partnership, then gradually introduce our technology and culture until the species loses its independence. Sometimes it takes decades, sometimes centuries, but it always works. Except it's not working with humans. Zarathel smiled, and Jake was beginning to recognize this expression as something uniquely hers. None of the other Zephyrians he had met showed such genuine emotion. No, it is not working with humans, at all. Your colonies that have been trading with us for years still maintain their own governments, their own customs, their own ways of solving problems. When we offer you solutions, you thank us politely, and then try to find better solutions on your own. They returned to their quarters where Zarathel activated the privacy shields again. This time, instead of touching his hand, she simply sat across from him and spoke directly. Jake, I need to show you something that will be difficult to understand, but it is crucial that you know the full truth. She produced a device that looked like a crystalline tablet. When she activated it, holographic images appeared in the air between them. These are records from our previous integration projects, she said. The images showed various alien species in different stages of absorption into Zephyrian society. What you need to understand is that none of these species fought the process. They welcomed it. Jake watched as proud warrior races laid down their weapons to accept Zephyrian peace. Advanced civilizations abandoned their own technologies in favor of superior Zephyrian alternatives. Artistic cultures stopped creating their own works to study Zephyrian masterpieces. How did you make them want to give up everything that made them unique? We did not force them, Zarathel said. We simply offered them something better. Longer lives, more advanced technology, freedom from war and struggle. Every species we have encountered eventually decides that joining us is preferable to remaining independent. But humans haven't made that choice. No. Even when faced with technology that could solve many of your problems, humans prefer to solve those problems themselves. Even when offered lives free from conflict, humans choose to maintain their own military forces. Even when presented with art and culture more refined than your own, humans continue creating their own music and stories. Jake thought about his friend Ryan, who had been excited about Zephyrian technology, but equally excited about figuring out how to improve upon it. He thought about Admiral Carter, who had accepted this alliance but maintained strong defenses in case it turned out to be a trap. We're stubborn, he said. You are independent, Zarathel corrected. You value your freedom more than comfort, your growth more than security. These are traits my people lost so long ago that we have forgotten what they feel like. She deactivated the holographic display and looked directly at him. Jake, the High Council is growing impatient with humanity's resistance to integration. There are those who believe more direct methods should be used. What kind of direct methods? Telepathic conditioning, memory alteration, making humans believe that joining our empire was their own idea. These techniques have been refined over thousands of years and tested on dozens of species. Jake felt cold dread settling in his stomach. Would that work on humans? We do not know. Human brain patterns are different from any species we have encountered. Your neural plasticity and genetic diversity make you unpredictable. But the High Council is preparing to find out. How long do we have? Zarathel was quiet for a moment, and Jake could see her struggling with the answer. The integration process was supposed to begin with our marriage. Our children would have been the bridge between our species. carrying both human adaptability and Zephyrian telepathic abilities. But if that natural process fails, they will try more direct approaches. And if those fail, then they will decide that humanity is too dangerous to exist as an independent species. Jake stood up and began pacing the room, just as Zarathel had done the previous night. The weight of representing not just himself but his entire species felt overwhelming. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Why risk yourself to warn me?" Zarathel stood as well, moving to the window that showed the stars outside. "Because in the few days I have known you, I have felt more alive than I have in my entire existence. Because when you look at me, you see not just a princess or a political ally, but a person. Because you have shown me that there might be another way to live, a way that does not require absorbing others to feel complete." She turned back to face him. "And because I believe that if anyone can find a solution to this impossible situation, it will be a human." Jake woke up the next morning with a plan forming in his mind. If the Zephyrians had been studying humanity for decades, then humans needed to start studying the Zephyrians just as carefully. But he couldn't do it alone. During the morning meal, which was served in their quarters, Jake carefully brought up the subject of Dr. Rodriguez. "I'd like Elena to continue her cultural research while we're aboard your ship," he told Zarathel. She was fascinated by what she learned during the diplomatic meetings. Zarathel paused, a piece of fruit halfway to her mouth. "That could be arranged, but Jake, you must be very careful about what you reveal to her." "I understand. But Elena is brilliant, and she's already noticed things about your people that your own leaders might not realize. If we're going to find a solution, we need her expertise." Later that day, Dr. Rodriguez was transported to the Stellar Crown under the pretense of continuing diplomatic research. Elena Rodriguez was a small woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a mind that never stopped asking questions. Jake had worked with her before and trusted her completely. When they met in Jake's quarters with Zarathel present and the privacy shields activated, Elena's first words were exactly what Jake had expected. "Something is very wrong with this entire situation," she said without any greeting. "I've been studying the cultural data the Zephyrians provided, and there are huge gaps in their historical records. Civilizations don't just stop innovating for no reason." Jake looked at Zarathel, who nodded slightly. "Elena," Jake said, "what I'm about to tell you must stay between us. The situation is more dangerous than any of us realized," he explained. Everything Zarathel had revealed about the absorption process, the fate of other species, and the plans for humanity. Elena listened without interruption, but Jake could see her growing anger and concern. "Those aren't cultural exchange programs," Elena said when he finished. "That's systematic cultural genocide." "The High Council does not see it that way," Zarathel said quietly. "They believe they are offering inferior species the chance to become part of something greater." "And what do you believe?" Elena asked, studying the Zephyrian princess with the same intensity she brought to all her research. Zarathel was quiet for a moment. "I believe we are afraid. We have achieved everything we thought we wanted. Long lives, advanced technology, a vast empire. But we are empty inside, so we try to fill that emptiness by taking what makes other species special." Elena nodded slowly. "That explains the psychological profiles I've been seeing. Your people show classic symptoms of severe depression on a species-wide scale." Over the following days, Elena conducted careful interviews with various Zephyrians aboard the ship, ostensibly for her cultural research, but actually looking for evidence of the absorption process. What she found was deeply disturbing. "Jake, they're not even trying to hide it," Elena reported during one of their private meetings. "I spoke with a crew member who used to be part of something called the Kelvani civilization. When I asked him about his people's art, he described it in perfect detail but with no emotion at all. It was like he was reading from an encyclopedia instead of talking about his own culture." "Did he seem unhappy about it?" Zarathel asked. "That's the scary part. He seemed completely content. He told me that joining Zephyrian society had freed him from the burden of creative struggle and allowed him to appreciate true perfection." Those were his exact words. Jake felt sick. They don't even realize what they've lost. "It gets worse," Elena continued. I found records of 26 different integration projects over the past 3,000 years. Each one followed the same pattern: diplomatic contact, cultural exchange, gradual dependency, then complete absorption. The timeline for humanity shows we're currently in Phase 3. Zarathel confirmed this with obvious reluctance. The marriage ceremony was supposed to mark the beginning of Phase 4, hybrid breeding to create bridge individuals. But there's something else, Elena said, and her expression was troubled. Jake, I think some members of the High Council are planning to accelerate the timeline. She produced a small recording device. I managed to record part of a conversation between two senior council members. Listen to this. The recording was in the Zephyrian language, but Zarathel translated as it played. Council member Velmoth is saying that humanity's resistance to integration is unprecedented. Council member Mordeth is arguing that they should move directly to Phase 5, forced mental conditioning. Jake had heard that name before. Mordeth was at our wedding ceremony. Yes, Zarathel said. He is the most influential member of the High Council after my father. He believes that humanity's independence makes us too dangerous to exist. The recording continued, and Zarathel's expression grew increasingly alarmed as she translated. They are discussing something called the Final Protocol. If humanity cannot be integrated normally, they will use telepathic weapons to alter human brain chemistry on a global scale. Every human would become docile and compliant, willing to accept Zephyrian rule. Elena stared at her. Is that even possible? Unfortunately, yes. We have done it before, though only on smaller scales. The technology exists to affect entire planets at once. Jake felt rage building inside him, but he forced himself to stay calm. How long before they make this decision? The High Council will meet in 5 days to discuss the Human Integration Project, Zarathel said. If they decide that normal methods are not working, they could authorize the Final Protocol immediately. We have to warn Earth, Jake said, moving toward the communication console. Wait, Zarathel said urgently. If you send any kind of warning message, the ship's communication systems will detect it. The High Council will know I have betrayed them. Jake stopped, realizing the impossible position they were in. Any attempt to warn humanity would expose Zarathel and potentially trigger the very response they were trying to prevent. There has to be another way, Elena said, her scientific mind already working on the problem. Zarathel, are there other Zephyrians who think like you do? Others, who question what your people have become. Some of the younger generation have begun to ask questions, Zarathel admitted. They see the emptiness in our society, but they have no alternative to compare it to. Most of them believe this is simply the natural result of achieving perfection. But not all of them, Zarathel thought carefully before answering. There are perhaps a dozen individuals who have expressed doubts privately. But Jake, you must understand that questioning the High Council's wisdom is considered a form of mental illness among my people. Those who do so are usually sent for therapeutic adjustment. Elena looked horrified. Brainwashing. Correction of antisocial thought patterns, Zarathel said with bitter irony. Very few Zephyrians resist the process. Jake began pacing again, a habit he was developing under stress. What about the other species on this ship? The ones who were absorbed? Are any of them capable of independent thought? I do not know, Zarathel admitted. The integration process is designed to be permanent. But Jake, your friend Captain Brooks, will be joining us soon for the ceremonial dinner with the High Council. Perhaps he could help. Jake stopped pacing. He had almost forgotten about the dinner, a formal event where both human and Zephyrian leaders would celebrate the new alliance. Ryan would be there along with Admiral Carter and other human officials. That's it, he said suddenly. The dinner is our opportunity. For what? Elena asked. To expose the truth. If we can reveal the absorption conspiracy in front of representatives from both species, we might be able to prevent the Final Protocol. Zarathel looked afraid. Jake, if we do that, there will be no going back. The High Council will see it as an act of war. They're planning to mentally enslave my entire species, Jake said grimly. We're already at war, we just haven't started fighting back yet. Elena nodded agreement. He's right, and Jake, if we're going to do this, we need proof. Hard evidence that the High Council will not be able to deny. I can provide that, Zarathel said quietly. I have access to historical records, absorption protocols, even the technical specifications for the telepathic weapons. But once I access those files, security systems will detect the breach. We will have very little time. Jake looked at his wife and his friend, both of whom were willing to risk everything to prevent a catastrophe. Then we better make sure we get it right the first time. The ceremonial dinner was held in the Stellar Crown's grandest hall, a vast chamber with walls that showed the stars outside as if they were floating in space itself. Representatives from dozens of alien species sat at tables arranged around a central stage where speakers would address the gathering. Jake sat at the head table between Zarathel and Admiral Carter. His friend Ryan was nearby, along with Dr. Rodriguez and several other human officials. Across from them sat the members of the Zephyrian High Council, including Chancellor Mordeth, whose cold blue eyes seemed to study every human present. The evening began with formal speeches about cooperation and mutual benefit. Jake listened to the translated words while his heart pounded with nervous energy. Hidden in his formal jacket was a small recording device that Elena had modified using Zephyrian technology. If their plan worked, it would broadcast Zarathel's evidence to every ship in the fleet. The alliance between our peoples represents a new age of peace and prosperity, Chancellor Mordeth was saying. Together we will explore the galaxy and bring the benefits of advanced civilization to all worlds. Jake caught Ryan's eye and saw his friend's slight nod. Ryan had been briefed on the plan, though not all the details. Admiral Carter remained unaware, which Jake regretted, but there had been no safe way to inform her without risk of discovery. When it came time for Jake to speak, he stood and moved to the central stage. The gathered aliens looked at him with polite attention, expecting the usual diplomatic pleasantries. I want to thank our Zephyrian hosts for their hospitality, Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's translation systems. This marriage between Princess Zarathel and myself represents more than just a political alliance. It represents the hope that different species can work together while maintaining what makes each of us unique. He paused, seeing Chancellor Mordeth's slight frown at the emphasis on maintaining uniqueness. However, Jake continued, I have learned some disturbing information about the true nature of Zephyrian alliances with other species. The hall fell silent. Admiral Carter was staring at him with alarm, while Chancellor Mordeth had gone very still. Princess Zarathel will now present evidence of a systematic program of cultural absorption that has been carried out against 26 different species over the past 3,000 years. Chaos erupted immediately. Chancellor Mordeth was on his feet, speaking rapidly in the Zephyrian language to his guards. Admiral Carter was demanding to know what Jake thought he was doing, but Zarathel had already moved to the chamber's central control system. I am sorry, Father, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall as she began activating the evidence files. But I cannot stand by and watch our people destroy another beautiful civilization. Holographic displays appeared throughout the chamber, showing the historical records of species absorption. The gathered aliens watched in stunned silence as the evidence unfolded. Detailed plans for integration, psychological profiles of targeted species, and technical specifications for the telepathic weapons used to ensure compliance. This is treason, Chancellor Mordeth declared, but his words were translated and broadcast to every ship in the fleet. These records are classified for the protection of our subjects. Your subjects? Jake stepped forward, the recording device now broadcasting everything. You mean the species you've enslaved? The civilizations you've destroyed? But something unexpected was happening in the hall. Several of the alien representatives, members of species that Jake had assumed were willing allies of the Zephyrians, were standing and speaking in their own languages. The universal translators carried their words to everyone present. The Kelvani remember our art, one being was saying, his voice filled with emotion Jake had never heard from any Zephyrian subject before. We remember who we were before you made us forget. The Therian cities were beautiful, another voice added. We built them to sing with the wind, not to house your factories. Elena had been right. The absorption process wasn't as complete as the Zephyrians believed. Deep down, the subjected species retained memories of their original cultures. Chancellor Mordeth was shouting orders to his guards, but something remarkable was happening to them as well. The younger Zephyrian soldiers were hesitating, looking at each other with confusion and what might have been the first genuine emotions they had felt in decades. You feel it, don't you? Zarathel called out to them. The emptiness inside, the sense that something is missing from your lives? These humans have shown me what we lost when we stopped growing, stopped struggling, stopped caring about anything beyond our own comfort. One of the guards, a young Zephyrian female, dropped her weapon. Princess, I have been having dreams about colors that do not exist in our art, music that is not in our archives. Those are not dreams, Zarathel said gently. Those are memories of what we once were, before we decided that perfection was more important than growth. The rebellion spread through the chamber like wildfire. Absorbed species began remembering their heritage. Young Zephyrians began questioning everything they had been taught, and even some of the older council members looked uncertain. But Chancellor Mordeth was not finished. Enough, he declared, producing a device that Jake recognized from the technical specifications they had seen. If you will not accept guidance willingly, then you will accept it by force. The telepathic weapon activated, and Jake felt a pressure in his mind unlike anything he had ever experienced. Around the chamber, aliens began collapsing as the device attempted to override their free will. But Jake remained standing. The weapon that had worked on dozens of other species seemed to have no effect on him at all. Impossible, Chancellor Mordeth whispered. Not impossible, Elena called out from her position near the recording equipment. Predictable. Human neural patterns are too chaotic for your telepathic weapons to affect. We're too stubborn to be controlled, even by technology. The failed telepathic attack had an unexpected side effect. The energy discharge interfered with the conditioning that kept absorbed species compliant. Throughout the chamber, beings were standing up with clear eyes for the first time in centuries. Ryan had reached the weapons controls and was systematically shutting down the Zephyrian telepathic systems. Jake, I'm reading massive power fluctuations throughout the ship. Whatever that device did, it's caused system failures everywhere. But the most dramatic change was happening to the Zephyrians themselves. Freed from the subtle telepathic conditioning that had kept their own society stable, they were experiencing emotions they had suppressed for millennia. I remember joy, one of the younger council members said with wonder. I remember what it felt like to create something new instead of just maintaining what others built. Zarathel moved to Jake's side, and when she took his hand, he could feel through their connection that she was no longer the reserved princess he had married. She was fully alive, fully herself, for the first time in her existence. What have you done? Chancellor Mordeth demanded, but his voice lacked the authority it had held before. Even he seemed affected by the energy discharge. We've given everyone a choice, Jake said simply. The same choice humans make every day, whether to grow or to stagnate, whether to struggle and improve or to accept easy answers that lead nowhere. The aftermath was remarkable. Within hours, Zephyrian ships throughout the fleet were declaring independence from the High Council. Species that had been absorbed for centuries were rediscovering their cultures and demanding the right to rebuild their civilizations. Admiral Carter, once she understood what had happened, immediately opened communications with Earth. We need to prepare for refugees, she told Jake. Millions of beings are going to need help remembering how to be free. But the most significant change was in the Zephyrians themselves. Led by Zarathel and the younger generation, they began dismantling the systems that had kept their empire together. Instead of a single massive civilization, they chose to become dozens of smaller communities, each free to develop in its own direction. 6 months later, Jake stood on the bridge of a new kind of ship, one built jointly by humans and reformed Zephyrians. The vessel was called Unity, and it served as the flagship for the Free Species Alliance, a coalition of civilizations that had chosen growth over comfort, diversity over uniformity. Zarathel joined him at the observation deck, her presence in his mind now a welcome sensation rather than an alien intrusion. Their children would be born into a galaxy where being different was valued rather than feared, where every species contributed its unique gifts to the whole. "Any regrets?" Jake asked her. She smiled, an expression that had become natural to her over the months of rediscovering emotion. "How can I regret trading an empty eternity for a meaningful life?" Through the ship's windows, they could see vessels from dozens of different species, each maintaining its own distinct design and culture, while working together toward common goals. The galaxy had become a more chaotic place full of conflict and struggle and imperfection. It had also become infinitely more alive. Jake had entered this marriage as a reluctant diplomat serving his species' interests. He had discovered that sometimes the greatest service one could provide was to help others remember what made life worth living in the first place.